Hey, LinkedIn, and welcome to Business Unusual. This is a live show where we talk about the changing nature of work. I'm Susie Jackson. I'm a news editor at LinkedIn. It's September 17th. Let's look at some of the top stories professionals are talking about today. Jobless claims in the U.S. dip, but remain high overall. New claims for unemployment benefits dropped by 33,000 last week to 860,000. That's still more claims than we were seeing in March before the pandemic took hold. Businesses have replaced about half of the 22 million jobs lost when lockdowns began in spring. Software company Snowflake making history. The data storage provider just notched the biggest software IPO ever. Snowflake ended trading yesterday around $254 per share, which valued the Warren Buffett-backed company at $70 billion. Right now, shares trading around $230. And Big Ten football is back. The conference will kick off the 2020 football season the weekend of October 24th after receiving pressure from players, parents, and even the White House. This reverses the Big Ten's earlier decision to cancel its seasons. Teams will play an abbreviated 8-game schedule, and athletes will undergo daily testing for the coronavirus. You can stay on top of the news by checking out the LinkedIn news module. It's to the right of your newsfeed if you're on your desktop. You can see it in that graphic there, or if you're on mobile, by clicking into your search box. Staying mentally and physically healthy has been a big topic of conversation for months as we deal with COVID-19. And today we want to bring nutrition into the conversation. Where you may have previously dashed out for a salad or snack during your workday, even if you ate it at your desk, you now might find yourself standing in your own kitchen wondering what's for lunch. Home cooking is on the rise, as we've seen from everyone's pictures of their sourdough loaves on Instagram, and the way you eat is in your own hands now more than ever. Our first guest today is Max Lugavere. He is a science journalist and author of the New York Times bestseller Genius Foods: Become Smarter, Happier, and More Productive While Protecting Your Brain for Life. Max, welcome to Business Unusual today.
Thanks so much for having me, Susie. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think that your book sounds great. Becoming smarter, happier, and more productive sounds like all things that I would like to be doing right now. One thing you talk a lot about in your book and that you share in your podcast as well is the impact of food and nutrition on our moods. I want to start by talking about that as we're continuing to work from home. We're heading into the fall season. This is stretching on. What are some of the foods that boost brain activity and can help us all stay focused while we're trying to work?
Yeah, so I think for many people, it's about keeping blood sugar levels stable and supplying the brain with nutrients that are going to support its optimal function. I mean, I think people forget that our moods are a function of this neurobiological structure that hides just inches behind your eyes, between your ears, the same way that movement is produced by our joints. And so you've got to take care of this organ, your brain. You can't flex it in the mirror when you're looking in the mirror. You can't, see it emerge, with a vigorous workout routine like you can your abs for many people. But nonetheless, we have to take care of it. And food is among the most powerful ways that we can do so. So the kinds of foods that I like to talk about, I've coined the term genius foods to describe foods that mechanistically really can support optimal brain function. And when we look at what's called epidemiology or population studies, we see that people who eat these kinds of foods on a more regular basis tend to have better outcomes in terms of their cognitive health and their mental health. And when I say cognitive health, I mean, being able to avert things like Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia, which is a topic that I'm very passionate about as well. So when I talk about genius foods, I mean, these foods are essentially whole, unprocessed foods. Now, when we take them home and we cook them, we're doing a little bit of processing. So I'm not saying that processed foods are inherently villainous, but foods like avocados, blueberries, broccoli, cruciferous vegetables, which broccoli would be considered one of, grass-fed beef, which I know is controversial, but grass-fed beef provides a myriad of nutrients that is critically important to optimal brain function. Wild fatty fish like salmon and sardines, dark chocolate. I usually get applause from audiences when I speak to them and I talk about the fact that dark chocolate is actually a powerful brain food. These are all foods that are typically found around the perimeters of our supermarkets, which is where the most healthy food tends to be. Supermarkets tend to be designed the same. In the aisles, you have what are called ultra processed foods, and those are the foods that you want to do your best to minimize. So these foods really what they do is they provide the precursor molecules to neurotransmitters in your brain, like serotonin, which is critically important for having a healthy mood, healthy executive function, things like that. Um, and they also don't they're very satiating. So at the end of the day, I talk to a lot of people with varying nutritional needs. Everybody's different. At the end of the day, the diet that's going to be best for you is going to be the one that's going to satiate you. It's going to keep you sated the longest so that you're not running around spending all day hungry. um, and that's important too, keeping our bodies in good shape, making sure that we are metabolically healthy, that our waistlines don't expand too much. There's actually an interesting inverse correlation between the size of our waists and our total brain volume. So it seems what might be the case is that as our waists expand, our brains actually shrink. And so these are foods that are going to help kind of rein that in for you.
Wow, just another reason to try to keep that waistline in check. I'm interested. You're talking about foods that keep you full. So these are healthy foods, they're good for your brain, but you still need to eat to a place where you're comfortable. But
Yeah.
what's your stance on snacking? A lot of us might be coming from offices that had snacks laying around, or maybe that you could kind of quickly run out and grab something that's kind of shove it in your face and without thinking about it. But now you're home, what you're reaching for might be different, or there might be nothing there. But what about snacking? Should we be trying to incorporate that in a healthy way, or should we be feeling satiated and not needing to snack between meals?
Yeah, I call them snackcidents. Having a snackcident. I'm guilty of this all the time. And the truth is that when we consume foods that food scientists refer to as ultra processed packaged foods, these foods are not satiating. They're at the opposite end of the satiety spectrum. Foods like, pizzas and bagels and packaged chips and pretzels and things like that. For the most part, these foods drive their own overconsumption. They have a characteristic called hyperpalatability, which basically pushes your brain's reward centers to a bliss point beyond which self-control is futile. And I've done this many, many times. I've opened up a bag of whether it's a bag of chips or cheese puffs or whatever, only intending on having just a handful, and before I know it, the whole bag is gone. Same with a pint of ice cream. So the best thing to do, I think, is to have what's called planned indulgences. To not feel guilty about when we choose to indulge, which is a very human and understandable thing to do in this day and age, but to essentially make it so that it's informed consent, so that that when you're cracking open that pint of ice cream or the bag of whatever your guilty pleasure happens to be, that you're ready for what's going to ensue. You're ready for the lapse in willpower that these foods are basically designed to invoke. The other way that I'd like to minimize snacking, because I spend a lot of time in proximity to my kitchen as well, is simply to not bring foods into my house that I know are going to be trigger foods for me. So when I'm shopping around the supermarket, I realize that if it's in my shopping cart, it's as good as in my stomach. And generally, I'm going to end up consuming the whole bag or pint or whatever it is that I'm consuming. And if it doesn't fit into my dietary goals, then I'm simply not going to purchase those foods.
I think that's a great point about what's in your shopping cart is just going to be in your stomach automatically. It's something to keep in mind too, as many of us are shopping online more for groceries. I liked your advice about sticking to the outsides of the grocery store, but if you're just scrolling through, you might be getting recommendations for things that are these processed foods that you're talking about, and kind of a reminder that you're as good as eating it already. You're talking about planned indulgences too. I had to smile because mine is often I will sit on the couch with a pint of ice cream and an oven mitt, just eating it straight out of the pint so that I don't get my hand too cold. And I do let myself just enjoy that. But something that's
Nothing wrong with that.
thank you. Something that's a little less enjoyable lately is that we're working from home. COVID is really wreaking havoc on our lives. We're not going outside as much. We're not commuting. We're not seeing friends as often. I'm really interested in what are the effects that those are cumulatively having on our health, and what are some solutions as we're really supposed to try to stay inside still as this stretches on.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting outside as much as we can, even today, remains important. I mean, Dr. Fauci himself recently gave an interview where he admitted to taking vitamin D and vitamin C supplements because they might potentially help reduce our susceptibility to COVID-19. So vitamin D is an incredibly important steroid hormone that regularly regulates the expression of 5% of the human genome. Many of those genes are involved in immune function. So continuing to go outside, I think I mean, I'm not a public health expert, and I'm certainly not an immunologist, but I believe based on my research that continuing to make sure that our vitamin D levels are adequate, and we can do that by exposing our skin to the rays of the sun or by taking a vitamin D3 supplement. I think that remains crucially important. Also, something that most people don't realize is that healthy magnesium levels can help dictate whether or not we're actually utilizing vitamin D in our body. So, eating foods that are high in the mineral magnesium, very important. So, almonds, any dark leafy green, and dark chocolate are all going to be great sources of magnesium. And the other value add of getting outside and at least getting access to sunlight is that it anchors our body's circadian rhythm. Our circadian rhythm is this sort of biological clock that each of us undergo every single day on a 24-hour timer. And our immune function is in many ways influenced by this circadian rhythm, this rhythmicity, if you will. And so every morning when I wake up, I try to at least stand by a window or work by a window, respond to emails by an open window where I can allow the ambient light of the sun to enter my eyes. And that basically sets forth this clock that dictates not only our alertness and our energy levels during the day, which is when we want to have our most optimal levels of energy and focus and attention, but it also dictates when we get sleepy. And it helps essentially guarantee that we're going to get better sleep later on in the day, which is important for immune function as well.
That's great. I want to welcome some of the folks joining us on the stream today. We have Reggie from New York. Adriana is from Brazil. Roberta from Florida. Welcome to Business Unusual. Mira from Australia. Victoria from LA. And Quentin from Virginia. We've got some folks here sharing what they're doing when they're home as well. Dillard says his this planned indulgence is fruit, so different from my oven mitt with a pint of ice cream. Dillard, I commend you for that. Let's see. Melissa says she tries to have veggies cut up and ready to eat in her fridge at all times. So a great creative way there, Melissa, really simple. Have the stuff pre-made so it's easy to grab. Max, I want to talk about other ways to be creative when we're trying to stay healthy nutritionally. I think some people might find a little challenge in that. You're mentioning some foods that are pretty obvious, avocado, blueberry, easy to know that that's healthy. But we're going to bring up a graphic here. Let's talk about some of the other things that you could be thinking about swapping out that might be a little less obvious.
Yeah, so this is some of the content that I create on my Instagram every single day, helping to share ways in which people can make small changes in their diets and lifestyles that over the long term are going to add up to big health wins. And these are a little bit aspirational. I just want to be clear, if you don't have access to, for example, pasture-raised eggs, conventional eggs are still an incredibly nutrient-dense food. And also when thinking about snacks, one of the things that I didn't mention earlier is that we should always be reaching for higher protein foods because protein is the most satiating of the macronutrients being protein, carbs, and fat. And so eggs, hard-boiled eggs, for example, if you enjoy that food, is a wonderful snack that's going to satiate your hunger and keep you content up until your next meal. But some of these swaps, conventional eggs, swapping them for pasture-raised eggs. We know that pasture-raised eggs, when chickens are allowed to forage on the pasture, their eggs, the yolks specifically, are a lot more nutrient dense. They have higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids. They have higher levels of compounds called carotenoids, which we know can boost brain function and actually make your brain work better. Also good for your skin and your eyes. Processed cheese is not really, that would fall under the ultra processed food category. Not the most nutritious food. Lots of, additives and unhealthy oils. Nutritional yeast is something that many vegans might be familiar with, but I think that it's something that we all ought to be familiar with. It's a very tasty food. Tastes like cheese. It contains a ton of protein, fiber, B vitamins, and I like to add it into my salads, onto my scrambles, you name it. It's a really wonderful food. Commercial pickles usually have artificial colors added in. They're not bad foods, at all. But raw pickles are an incredible opportunity to actually ingest probiotics, which provide all kinds of fun metabolites due to the fermentation process. And you can find those in the refrigerated section. Again, around the perimeter of your supermarket, as opposed to in the aisles, which is where you'll find the commercial pickles. And then one of the major nutritional points that I'm kind of a stickler on, I talk about it in my book, Genius Foods, and also in my latest book, The Genius Life, is you really want to avoid unhealthy oils. These are oils like canola oil, corn oil, soybean oil, grapeseed oil. And by and large, the place where you're going to find these oils in the highest concentration are commercial salad dressings. It's very easy to make a delicious salad dressing at home. I love to, experiment with salads. There are no rules. So I'm using extra virgin olive oil. I'm using balsamic vinegar, lemon, salt, pepper. things like that. And I'm avoiding commercial salad dressings, which tend to be actually quite unhealthy. Lots of added sugar, those unhealthy oils I mentioned, and the like. So the point is that no matter where you are, no matter who you are, you can take simple steps in your day that don't have to be these big 180-degree life turns. You can take small steps that over the long term are going to add up, and in the short term are going to make you feel incrementally better.
I think small steps is great advice right now. It doesn't have to seem overwhelming. It can just be little things that you just start with today. It doesn't have to be a complete diet 180. Don't put that pressure on yourself. Max, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all these tips with our audience. This room was really loving what you had to say.
Thank you, Susie, for having me.
That was Max Lugavere. You can listen more on his podcast, The Genius Life. It's on iTunes. And a small correction, his book title is The Genius Life as well. Now that we've just talked about all that food, we have a treat for you. We're going to see some healthy snacks made here live on the show. Joining us now from the Chobani Test Kitchen in New York City is Chef Jake Briere. Jake leads the culinary strategy for Chobani. Jake, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on, Susie. I appreciate it.
Jake, we just heard from Max about fresh ingredients, how they're important to the food that we eat. But for people who don't cook, that can be a little fear-inducing sometimes, thinking about cooking from scratch. What is one way people can get over that, in your opinion?
Yeah. So for me, cooking comes with confidence, and it takes time to gain that confidence. So start where you're comfortable. So maybe not approach a recipe that requires 10 ingredients you haven't heard of. Always use fresh ingredients. By cooking simpler recipes, you don't always have to dive into 20 different ingredients. You can use 5 ingredients that are really high quality, that are super fresh, and you're going to come up with a great, delicious meal.
That's great. So echoing what Max said there, keep it simple, start small. I know that you're really passionate about the outdoors and seasonal eating. Why is that? And what are you going to make for us today?
Yeah. So when it comes to seasonality and cooking fresh ingredients, you always want to try to get to the source of your food or as close as possible. So that means, going to the farmer's market or the local farm that's growing your produce, getting really comfortable with your fishmonger for fresh seafood. That's always going to give you the upper hand, which is going to give you high quality ingredients. It's going to allow you to put out a great meal that tastes delicious. That's also low stress.
All right. Low stress sounds good in the kitchen right now. Jake, what are you going to make for us?
Oh, yeah. So today we're going to make a summer kind of herb and mustard dressing sauce that I've been utilizing a lot through 2020. And then we're also going to do a little bit of a whipped Greek yogurt topping since we're here in the Chobani Test Kitchen. That's going to go on top of a stone fruit crumble.
All right. That sounds delicious. Let's get to cooking. We want to watch your every move here and see how we might replicate it ourselves. So we're going to let Jake walk around and show us his beautiful spread here in the kitchen. Chobani Test Kitchen looks a lot nicer than my kitchen. So I'm glad, Jake, that you're taking the helm for this right now. So I'm going to let you get started.
Okay, sounds good. So the mustard and herb sauce, right? So the base of the sauce is that fresh herb. So basically, what's great about this recipe is it's super versatile. It's really flexible. You can use anything that you have on hand or anything that you prefer. Today, I'm going to start with, chives, right? And I'm also going to use some basil and parsley are kind of my 3 go-tos right here. And we're going to use quite a bit of these herbs. So I've got a whole bunch of parsley here. I'm just going to hold it by the stem and kind of just take my knife and shave the top of that. And I'm not going to get too picky. This is all going to get blended. And that's just going to leave me with a nice pile of parsley and then the stems, which I can put to the side. So all of that can just go right into our blender. And then we have our basil, which I'm going to kind of pick through, just kind of avoid some of that larger stem on the bottom. Okay. And then these chives as well, I'm also just going to give them a quick chop.
That's good. I'll try not to talk to you while you're chopping because we don't want to see any accidents here. I'm curious about that blender. I feel like there are people who are really cult favorites of really, really pricey blenders. Is that really necessary?
If you ask a professional or a commercial chef, somebody, they're always going to say, yes, that high-end blender really does work for you. It makes the finest purees. It makes the best sauces, the soups. It just gets the particles that you're trying to blend to a certain size that the lower-end blenders are never going to be able to achieve. I'm a proud owner of Vitamix. I've had one for a long time, and I believe it'll probably be the last blender I buy.
Okay, but for folks like me who don't have that blender, should I still try this? Is it worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is not something that is, only for the high-end equipment user. Any blender will work fine, even if you have just kind of an immersion stick or blender like that. That'll be totally fine for this. So we're gonna keep going forward. I'm gonna do 1 garlic clove here. Okay. And again, I'm not really chopping this too much. I've got some shallot here as well, which I'm also gonna kind of just chop loosely. That's gonna go in there. And then I like lemon. You can use lime as well. So I'm just gonna do a squeeze of lime and kind of catch some of these seeds right here. Or a squeeze of lemon, sorry. And then the last thing that's gonna go into here besides our olive oil is just a little splash of apple cider vinegar for acidity. And then we have extra virgin olive oil, and this is going to be the base of the sauce. So I would say for about this much herbs, maybe 3/4 of a cup.
But I see you're not measuring there, Jake. So should us normal folks at home measure that, or should we just kind of feel it out like you just did?
No, again, this is really flexible. I would just kind of make this to your own accord and just kind of feel it out. You can always adjust it as you go. Again, it's a really super simple recipe.
Okay.
So in lieu of blending this and making a ton of noise, I've already prepared kind of this pre-made sauce. And then the last touch to this that I really like, I think is a nice touch, is this whole grain mustard. Okay, so instead of blending the mustard into the sauce, I'm just gonna go ahead and add a large scoop and just kind of fold that in. And that'll give you these really nice kind of toothy or kind of bitey mustard elements that I think go really, really well. So that's kind of it. I think a little bit of salt just to kind of season that up and make sure it tastes great.
That is great. Karen here says she's going to try it. She gives you a big enthusiastic thank you. Rhonda as well. I think Rhonda says yummy. So that's great that we can be there and taste it even though we're not in person. Jake, how long should someone blend it? Thank you for not blending it on air for all of our ears.
No problem. Just so it's about totally combined. So I would say 30 seconds on high.
Okay. So, and then once it's done, is it done? You just pour it over and serve? Do you refrigerate it? How long is it good for?
Yeah, it's good for up to a week. I would refrigerate it. So we're going to serve this right now. And I've just got a little bit of an heirloom tomato salad here that I'm just finishing up. And it's just got basically a few heirloom tomatoes. We're going to add a couple pieces of basil to it right here from our pile of herbs. And then a little bit of our buffalo mozzarella that I pulled apart here. And then that's just going to go over that. And it's bright, adds just like a really nice, beautiful contrast, really nice bright green. And then, again, utilizing those fresh summer vegetables. I know we're at the end of summer here, but I'm still holding on to that summer bounty, really trying to make the most of it.
Jake, that is beautiful. I'm going to ask if you don't mind bringing it a little closer to the camera so we can really get salivating over here. And while you're doing that, you just mentioned all these nice fresh ingredients. We have a lot of members in the stream talking about fresh versus frozen. Some people may not have access to getting the freshest stuff. Some people maybe buy in season and freeze it. Do you have any opinion about what fresh versus frozen?
No, I think actually utilizing frozen ingredients is a great technique to capture the peak of summer. At the end of summer, we'll often, freeze a big batch of corn off the cob and maybe utilize it into the fall. Any way that you can kind of preserve that height of freshness into the next season is a great way. So I have no problems with utilizing frozen ingredients. People often think of frozen peas. Well, those frozen peas were frozen right at their most ripe stage, and they're going to hold that flavor in the freezer for quite some time.
You know what a great other use of frozen peas is too? If you ever get a bump or a bruise, it's better than an ice pack because it'll conform to around whatever part.
Right over.
So even if you're not going to eat them, have some frozen peas in for safety reasons. What's the next thing you're going to make for us? We've got a nice lunch there. I wish I could share it with you. Is there a dessert next?
Yeah, so while we had our savory dish, we're going to make a quick little sweet dish. So with our Greek yogurt topping, let's see here. Max touched on a few things: whole foods, protein, satiation. With the Greek yogurt, you get a lot of that already. So what I've done here is I've started to whip a little bit of heavy cream. And heavy cream is about 40% fat. It's a little bit heavy. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold in half and half Greek yogurt to whipped cream. So that's going to give you a little bit of protein, some probiotics, and it's also going to cut down your saturated fat quite a bit. So I'm whipping this cream till about stiff peaks right here. Okay.
And us normal people will be able to whip that pretty well as well, or should we be using beaters or something else?
You can use a beater. You can use a stand mixer. If you are whipping by hand, you want to save a little bit of your arm strength. A good tip is to put a metal bowl or a glass bowl in the freezer with your whisk and kind of get those items, that cream too, get them really cold, because then they're going to capture that air just a little bit faster, and it'll take you about half the time that it would to whip, say, room temperature cream.
Ooh, good trick. We all need to save time, so that's a good one to know. Put it in the freezer and get it chilled down, and you'll have to use less muscle to get that whip to the right consistency. Okay.
Absolutely. So I'm going to add a little bit of powdered sugar to my whipped cream because we need a little bit of sweetness. And then when you go to whip your cream, once it's stiff, and I start to add in my Greek yogurt at about a 1-to-1 ratio, this is a vanilla Greek yogurt, by the way, then I'm just going to take a spatula, instead of continuing to whip that cream, I'm just going to fold it in softly. Okay, so it kind of keeps that height, it keeps the air, and it doesn't deflate too much.
Great, looking good. It's looking good. Is it sweet? It's looking sweet from here, but I'm a little far away.
It's looking sweet. So what we have to serve this over is kind of a nice little stone fruit crumble. So again, peaches and stone fruits are kind of that end of summer treat. I really look forward to them basically all throughout summer, but towards the end of summer, they've got a really nice peak ripeness, which I really, really like. So this crumble is a gluten-free crumble. It's just got a little topping to it, and then basically stone fruit and peaches. So we're going to take this crumble, and then we're just going to dollop a nice portion of this whipped topping on top there, and then you're all set.
All right, that's beautiful, Jake. Bring it over so we can see that one too. I think people really are going to start drooling over this one. So that's over a really lovely dessert that was already made in time for this. But what are some other things that people might be able to use a dollop of that on?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of my favorite ways to do it is just fresh berries right in the beginning of spring when all those fresh strawberries and blueberries are coming in. That with a little bit of sugar, kind of let them macerate for a little bit, and then fresh berries and that whipped cream is just, it's a great topping. It's a great way to finish an awesome meal.
Yeah, that sounds great. We've got a few members in the stream talking about some of their favorites as well. Angela says she does fruit and veggie smoothies. So I don't know what blender you have, Angela, but I hope it's working out well for you. Matthew says that he loves dark chocolate, echoing Max's sentiments earlier in the show. Patricia says that looks delicious, Jake. Michael says your earlier dish was colorful and beautiful. I'm sure it's very tasty. And Sarah says Chobani has started to do plant-based yogurts too, that would be good for this as well. So a little plug there from Sarah. Jake, thank you so much for joining us today, for showing us how to cook up some really simple recipes. You just did it here live on camera in just a few minutes. So for anyone who's feeling intimidated by getting into their home kitchen and rolling up their sleeves, I hope that you've made that feel a little bit easier, because it certainly worked for me. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That's Jake Briere. He is the head of creative. Oh, I'm ruining it. I'm sorry. He's at Chobani, and he does creative culinary work there. Thank you so much to Jake for joining us. Tomorrow on the show, we will have Get Hired live from the LinkedIn news page at 12 Eastern. My colleague Andrew Seaman will be talking to Madeline Mann. She is the founder of Self-Made Millennial, and they'll be having a great conversation about resume tips and tricks and different ways that you can get hired for your next job. I'm Susie Jackson. This has been Business Unusual. Thanks so much for joining us.